Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. NATO leaders are gathering in Ankara for this year's summit against the backdrop of Russia's war in Ukraine, growing pressure to increase defense spending, and renewed debate over Europe's role in the alliance. As the meeting continues, we're taking stock of the key discussions and what they tell us about NATO's priorities going forward. Joining us today on TVP World to discuss is Sigita Struberga, Secretary General of the Latvian Transatlantic Organization, whose expertise in Euro-Atlantic security and transatlantic cooperations brings us valuable perspective to the conversation. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
So following the NATO summit so far, to sum up the first day, what's your biggest takeaway so far?
So far, I would say that I see no surprises, to be honest. We know about different Trump's moods, but also we know that United States is still strong ally, strong member of NATO, and that's why there is no wonder that we hear the language we heard again from Trump today. But at the same time, Trump's presence tells a lot. Whatever he would say about the reasoning why he is there. When it comes to the first decisions, what we see in those first meetings, again there are no let's say news or surprises, taken in consideration that we know that already previously it was set in agenda to have discussions on the spending, on the ways how the spending will be used, and as well as the support to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
So all this is what we saw during this first day, with Canada's announcements regarding military and civilian support to Ukraine, as well as announcements regarding European spending for air defense, which is particularly important for our region. But still, as I said, not really many surprises so far.
Right. Now, one of the clearest themes has been strengthening NATO's defense industrial capacity, which is different from previous years that's usually discussing unity deployment and personnel. This time around, it is a more industry focused. Why has that become such a central priority in the alliance?
Because this is one of the weaknesses or vulnerabilities NATO has at this very point. But if we look on the preparations for NATO summit, already before it was clear that this topic will be in high agenda, taken in consideration that usually what we have is public forum next to the political forum of NATO or political summit. So this year we have this industry summit, which already signaled about high priority. And also the previous discussions on the vulnerabilities of NATO told us a lot about the needs of munition and other issues. So basically what we talk about is not only about 5% which are needed to be reached by member countries, but really how those 5% will be spent, with this meaning that it's not only some kind of imaginary, number in a row for each member state, but rather really how do we develop our capabilities, and in this case by developing weaponry, which is so much necessary for NATO.
Right, so like I mentioned, not only are the NATO countries talking about meeting a certain spending goal, but they're also solidifying how it looks like. Do you think that it also shows that we're moving beyond just political pledges towards more concrete commitments? Are we seeing things kind of more materializing?
Exactly. And this was also predicted before this summit, that this summit will not be that much about some kind of imaginary future plans or nice political commitments, but rather on very practical discussions on how those 5% on which agreement we had before will be spent, and how Europeans will strengthen their capabilities.
Right. Now, of course, Ukraine is going to be top of the agenda, or is still at the top of the agenda as well. And Zelenskyy coming in kind of making a plea for more air defense system. Do you think NATO allies are willing or capable enough to provide the demand that Ukraine needs right now?
I think almost main part of NATO members are very much keen into providing. The question is whether we have what to provide without making us too vulnerable. And this would be rather the key issue. And then we again return to industry, right?
Yeah, exactly. So perhaps this is also a reason why industry is such an important topic this time around. Now, looking at that trend, though, do you think that the focus on industry is to provide Ukraine with a short-term need, or are we looking at NATO countries essentially preparing for a long-term kind of defensive scenario or kind of a long-term deterrence facing up against Russia?
I think deterrence in this case is the issue mainly. Of course, the first needs, tactical needs, are very much about Ukraine. But at the same time, when we look on the further development, then deterrence by denial is the key, which we as NATO members, particularly in our region, need. And I think there is clarity between NATO member states that protecting our region means also to provide security architecture of Europe in general, as well as let's say legitimacy of talking about transatlantic ties as such.
Right. Now, of course, talking about this summit, we do have to talk about the U.S. President Donald Trump's involvement as well. Before the NATO summit, during the G7, it does seem like Trump has warmed up a bit more to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, as well as being more proactive in taking a stance on the side of Ukraine. However, Trump also has his grievances about the European countries. How is the general mood in the first day of the summit?
So I would divide this in two parts. One is about Trump's rhetorics. And unfortunately, today Trump returned to the rhetorics about Russia and Putin personally being interested in peace, and that peace is going to be let's say reached pretty soon, but this is about rhetorics. And second part, which I wanted to separate, is about very practical means which United States is still doing. Maybe we do not see financial support, what we saw during Biden's presidency, but what we see during Trump's presidency now is again still certain support towards Ukraine. And for example, now when we speak of Ukrainian victories in Russian territory, more and more we hear that this is a result where United States play certain role by providing intelligence information, etc. So that's why and also, by the way, we have seen even in Trump's rhetoric certain new sympathies towards Ukraine and Zelenskyy. So I think that's why we still see United States supporting Ukraine. Some might be willing to have more support, but we have what we have, and this is important, taking in consideration that at the moment, tactically, Ukraine is in quite a good position.
Right. And here I want to also get the Baltics perspective as well. Are the priorities emerging from the summit the ones that matter the most for countries on NATO's eastern flank?
Yes, of course. For Baltics, as well as, by the way, for Poland, of course, first and foremost, our air defense is important, and it has been mentioned today as one of priority. And then the second part is our all civilian preparedness. And this is what I have not heard yet. And probably it will be not mentioned in, let's say, widened way in the NATO declaration even tomorrow. But this is a particular need which we have in our region.
All right, of course, it is very important, but like you mentioned, we're not sure whether or not this will be one of the topics that's going to be touched upon. So heading towards tomorrow, of course, we still have a full day ahead of us. What would you be paying most attention to, and what do you think are the most important topic that will be brought up tomorrow that we can kind of focus on?
For me, I guess it wouldn't be topic necessarily. It would be rather demonstration of unity. And here we will watch, and I believe not only me, really, that's why I'm saying we will watch closely on not only Trump's behavior, but also our overall engagement of Trump with other member states, and also, let's say, those commitments being taken, not only in rhetorics later on, but then regarding topics, of course, support to Ukraine, the one which we discussed, as well as the support to industry. I think we really need to go from political language to very practical, concrete contracts with defense industry. We need concrete commitments regarding air defense providers, etc. So I think the most important is to get to very practical steps instead of political commitments or political discussions on whether Russia is a threat or not. Thanks God, at least this has been agreed. Even between most skeptical one, that Russia is a threat.
Right, so pragmatic and, actually having some concrete results is, of course, what we will be looking forward to when it comes to contract commitments. We'll see how that develops. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.